On a damp October evening in East Cleveland, the kind where the air smells like wet pavement and old leaves, 16-year-old Darian Cross stood under the flickering awning of Mr. Patel's corner store, pulling his hoodie tighter around his shoulders. The rain had come down hard and fast, turning the streets into shallow rivers and sending most folks scurrying for cover. But Darian wasn't waiting for the storm to pass. He was watching. Across the street, near the bus stop that hadn't worked in years, a young woman in a soaked coat stumbled sideways, her heel catching in a crack in the sidewalk. She dropped to one knee with a sharp gasp, clutching her ankle. Her phone skidded across the wet concrete and shattered into pieces. Cars rolled by, tires hissing on the slick road, but no one slowed down. No one ever did in this part of town unless they had to. Darian didn't think twice. He stepped off the curb, careful not to slip, and walked over. He kept his hands visible, his steps slow. He'd learned early that being a tall black kid in a hoodie made some people nervous, even when he was just trying to help. "Ma'am?" he said, stopping a few feet away. "You okay?" She looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed, not just from the rain. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair plastered to her face and a coat that looked way too expensive for a bus stop in this neighborhood. She tried to stand, winced, and sank back down. "I think I twisted my ankle," she said, voice shaky. "And my phone." "It's gone," Darian nodded. "Let me take a look." He crouched beside her, careful not to touch her unless she said it was okay. "Does it hurt to move it?" She gave a small nod. "A little. But I can't stay here. I just need to get somewhere safe." He glanced around. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows. "There's a free clinic 2 blocks down. They'll check you out, no questions asked. And I got a phone if you need to call someone." She hesitated, studying his face like she was trying to decide if he was real or some kind of trick. Then slowly she reached out and took his arm. He helped her up, letting her lean on him as they limped toward the clinic. She didn't say much, just whispered thanks once they got under the clinic's overhang. A nurse came out quickly, took one look, and ushered her inside. Darian waited outside, not because he expected anything, but because it felt wrong to just leave. 20 minutes later, she came back out, ankle-wrapped, face calmer. She smiled, really smiled, for the first time. "I'm Elise," she said. "Darian," he replied. She pulled a folded 20 from her coat pocket and held it out. "Please, for your time." He shook his head. "Nah, just glad you're all right." She stared at him like he'd spoken in another language. "You don't even know me." "Didn't need to," he said with a shrug. "You needed help." "That's enough," she didn't argue. Instead, she asked if he could call her a ride. He used his cracked screen phone, charged to 12%, to book a car. While they waited, they talked a little. Not about big things, just small ones. The rain, how cold it gets in Cleveland by November, how the clinic nurse reminded her of her aunt. When the black sedan pulled up, she got in, rolled down the window, and said, "Thank you, Darian, really." He nodded. "Take care of yourself, Elise." Then the car drove off and he walked home, wet shoes squelching with every step, already forgetting the whole thing. It was just another night in a life full of small kindnesses that never made headlines, but kept the world from falling apart. Darian lived above a laundromat on East 93rd Street, in a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like lavender detergent and simmering greens. His grandmother, Mama Lou, had run the place for 23 years. First as an employee, then as the owner after the old landlord retired and trusted her with the keys. She was in her late 60s now, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and hands that never stopped moving. She folded towels while watching the news, stirred pots while on the phone with church friends, and still managed to quiz Darian on his physics homework every night after dinner. His mom, Tanya, worked as a home health aide for elderly patients across the county. She left before sunrise and often didn't get home until after 10. Some weeks Darian barely saw her except in notes left on the fridge. Leftover stew and pot. Heat 3 mins. Love you. Got overtime, don't wait up. Proud of you. Darian didn't complain. He knew life wasn't fair, but he also knew you could build something solid even on shaky ground, if you kept your head down and your hands busy. He tutored 6th graders at the community center twice a week, bagged groceries at the local market on weekends, and spent his free time tinkering with broken electronics he found in alley dumpsters. Last month, he'd fixed an old laptop and gave it to Ms. Rivera, whose grandson needed one for school. She'd cried and brought him tamales for a week straight. School was school. He got good grades, not because he loved every subject, but because he knew they were his ticket out, not away from his neighborhood, but toward something bigger. He wanted to study engineering, maybe design affordable housing or clean water systems for places like the one he grew up in. His guidance counselor said he had a shot at a full ride if he kept his GPA up and nailed the SATs. So he studied, late into the night under the dim lamp on his desk, while the hum of dryers downstairs kept him company. A week after the rainy night, Darian was walking out of school, backpack slung over one shoulder, when a black town car, shiny, quiet, the kind that cost more than his building, pulled up to the curb. His stomach dropped. Cars like that didn't belong here. Not unless something was wrong. The window rolled down. A woman in a tailored gray suit looked out. Her hair was streaked with silver, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Darian Cross?" she asked. He stopped, cautious. "Yeah. My name is Genevieve Thorne," she said. "I'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." He glanced at the school doors. The bell had rung 5 minutes ago. Most kids were already gone. He could say no. But something in her tone, calm, respectful, made him nod. They sat in the counselor's office, the woman declining the offered coffee, hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't waste time. "The young woman you helped last Tuesday, Elise, is my niece," she began. "She's been struggling. Since her parents passed 3 years ago, she's withdrawn. We've tried everything. Therapists, travel, even a semester abroad. But nothing reached her. Until that night." Darian shifted in his seat. "I didn't do much." "You showed her kindness without expecting anything in return," Genevieve said softly. "In her world, that's rare. She hasn't stopped talking about it." She went on to explain that the Thorne family owned a major logistics company, warehouses, delivery fleets, supply chains across the country. Elise was the sole heir, but with that came pressure, isolation, and a life watched by cameras and advisors. That night, she'd snuck out without her security detail, just needing to feel like a regular person for a few hours, and when she fell, she thought no one would stop. "But you did," Genevieve said, "and that mattered more than you know." She offered him a scholarship, full tuition, books, housing, to a top-tier university. She also mentioned a summer internship with their innovation lab, where they were developing sustainable packaging. "You have a mind for solving problems," she said. "We'd be honored to support you." Darian listened, quiet. He'd seen how the wealthy helped people like him, always with conditions, always with a camera nearby. But Genevieve didn't mention publicity, didn't ask for photos, just said, "If you're willing, Elise would like to thank you properly. Maybe have coffee. No pressure." He thought about it all the way home. Not about the money, though that would ease his mom's shoulders, but about the look in Elise's eyes that night. Not pity, not fear, just relief. Like someone had finally seen her, not her name or her coat or her last name. 2 days later, he texted Genevieve back, "Okay, just coffee." He didn't know it then, but that simple reply would ripple through both their lives in ways neither could predict. But for now, on this ordinary afternoon in a city that rarely made the news, Darian Cross was just a kid who helped someone in the rain, and that, in itself, was enough. The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon, slipped into Darian's locker between his geometry textbook and a crumpled permission slip for a field trip he couldn't afford. It wasn't fancy, just a plain white envelope with his name written in neat cursive. Inside was a single card, black ink on cream paper, no logo, no address, just a time, a date, and a simple request. "Elise would be grateful to meet you at the Willow Gate entrance of Stanhope Park this Saturday at 11 a.m. She'll be wearing a blue scarf." Darian read it 3 times. He almost threw it away, convinced it was a prank, but something about the handwriting, the careful loops, the lack of flourish felt real. He showed it to Mama Lou over dinner that night. She stirred her collard greens slowly, then said, "If your gut says it's safe, go, but take your phone, and don't go past the gate." Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that smells like wood smoke and possibility. Darian wore his best jeans, slightly faded but clean, and a navy sweater his mom had bought him last Christmas. He walked the 20 minutes to Stanhope Park, heart thumping not from nerves but from the sheer strangeness of it all. He'd never been invited anywhere by someone who lived in a world he'd only seen in movies. At the Willow Gate, he spotted her right away. Elise stood beneath a sugar maple, its leaves blazing gold, a soft blue scarf wrapped around her neck. She looked different, lighter somehow. No expensive coat this time, just a simple wool jacket and boots. When she saw him, she smiled. Not the polite smile from the clinic, but something warmer, more genuine. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied. They walked, not toward the manicured gardens or the lake where tourists took photos, but along a quiet path lined with oaks, where the only sounds were rustling leaves and distant birds. At first they talked about small things, the weather, the weirdness of Cleveland winters, how the park's squirrels seemed to have zero fear of humans. Then slowly the conversation deepened. "I haven't left the estate much since everything," Elise admitted, kicking a pebble off the path. "People treat me like I'm made of glass, or like I'm a project to be managed. But that night, you didn't look at me like I was either." Darian shoved his hands in his pockets. "I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." "But you didn't ask for anything," she said, glancing at him. "Not even my last name," he shrugged. Didn't matter. They sat on a bench near a quiet pond. A pair of ducks glided across the water, leaving ripples in their wake. Elise told him about her parents, how her dad used to take her to the docks to watch cargo ships unload, how her mom loved old jazz records and would dance in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. She talked about the suffocating silence of the big house after they were gone, how every room felt like a museum of what used to be. "I'm not sad all the time," she said quickly, as if worried he'd think she was weak. "I just feel invisible, like I'm playing a role I never auditioned for." Darian understood that more than she knew. He told her about fixing bikes for kids in his building, how one little boy cried when Darian got his rusty old Huffy running again. He said it was the first time he felt like he owned something that worked. Darian said, "That's what matters, you know? Not how much it's worth, just that it works." Elise listened like every word mattered. No interruptions, no pity, just quiet attention. When it was time to go, she didn't offer money or gifts. Instead, she said, "Can we do this again? Just talk?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, they met every Saturday. Sometimes in the park, sometimes at a quiet cafe downtown where no one recognized her. They never talked about her family's company or his financial situation. They talked about books. She loved sci-fi. He preferred biographies. They debated whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She said yes. He called it a crime against cheese. They laughed about bad movie plots and shared stories about their favorite teachers. But outside their bubble, things were shifting. It started with a black SUV idling near Darian's school one morning. Then a woman in a crisp blazer approached him after tutoring, asking if he'd considered media training. If he was going to be in the public eye, he brushed it off until his mom came home one night looking exhausted and confused. "Got offered a promotion today," she said, stirring a pot of beans. "Regional supervisor. Double the pay, but I'd have to move to Cincinnati." Darian froze. "Cincinnati, when?" "Next month," she said. "They said it's a rare opportunity." Fast-tracked me, he knew. He didn't have proof, but he knew. Someone was trying to pull him away, cleanly, quietly, with a golden carrot instead of a threat. He told Elise the next Saturday. She went pale. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Aunt Genevieve wouldn't—" "Maybe not her," Darian said gently. "But someone in your world sees me as a problem." Elise clenched her fists. "Then I'll talk to them." "No," he said. "Don't make it a fight. That's what they want." Instead, he made a call. Not to lawyers or reporters, but to Mr. Delgado, the retired engineer who ran the community center's STEM program. Mr. Delgado had once told him, "Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just moves pieces on a board while you're not looking." Now Darian asked for advice. Mr. Delgado listened, then said, "You've got two choices. Walk away and let them win quietly, or stay and build something they can't ignore." That night, Darian sat at his desk, laptop open, sketching ideas. What if he could create a program that taught kids in his neighborhood how to build solar chargers, repair laptops, even design simple water filters? Something real, something useful, something that couldn't be bought or moved. He mentioned it to Elise the next week. Her eyes lit up. "I could help fund it," she said immediately. He shook his head. "Not like that. If it's your money, people will say it's charity. I want it to be ours, community run. You can support it, but quietly. No name on the building. No press." She thought about it, then nodded. "Okay, whatever you need." A few days later, Genevieve Thorne requested another meeting, but this time she came to him. She sat in Mama Lou's laundromat office, perched on a folding chair, accepting a cup of sweet tea with a quiet thank you. She didn't wear a suit this time, just a soft sweater and slacks. "I've been told there's concern about your influence on Elise," she began, voice low. "That you're a distraction from her responsibilities." Darian met her gaze. "I haven't asked her for a thing." "I know," she said. "That's why I believe you." She paused, then added, "But the board, they don't see people. They see risk, and right now you're a variable they can't control." "I'm not trying to control anything," Darian said. "I just want to help kids like me have a shot." Genevieve studied him for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Elise told me about your idea, the STEM program. I've drafted a proposal. Seed funding, equipment, a space downtown. But it's yours to run. Your rules. Your team." He flipped through the pages. Everything was laid out. Budget, timeline, partnerships with local colleges. No mention of the Thorne name. Just the Cross Initiative, named after his street, not his family. "Why?" he asked. "Because kindness like yours shouldn't be rare," she said simply, "and because Elise hasn't smiled this much in years." He accepted, but only if the first workshop happened in his neighborhood, in the community center basement, with kids from his block. Genevieve agreed. The night before the first session, Darian couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment, checking his list: soldering irons, circuit boards, safety goggles, handouts. Mama Lou found him at 2 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table with a half-built solar lamp. "You're doing good work, baby," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I just hope it's enough," he murmured. "It's more than enough," she replied. "You're showing them that their hands can build something beautiful. That's everything." The next day, 12 kids showed up, some skeptical, some wide-eyed. Darian didn't lecture. He handed out kits and said, "Let's see what we can make together." By the end of the afternoon, every kid had a working LED light powered by a tiny solar panel. One girl, no older than 10, held hers up like a trophy. "I made this?" she whispered. Darian smiled. "You sure did." That evening, as he walked home, his phone buzzed. A text from Elise. "Heard it went great. Proud of you." He typed back, "Thanks. Next week we're building phone chargers. You in?" Her reply came instantly. "Wouldn't miss it." And just like that, something new began, not built on wealth or status, but on shared purpose, quiet trust, and the simple belief that helping someone shouldn't require a reason. The world outside might still be watching, waiting for a misstep. But in that moment, walking under streetlights he'd helped fix last summer, Darian felt something rare. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because he was exactly where he needed to be. The first few weeks of the workshop ran smoother than Darian could have hoped. Kids came back every Saturday, some bringing friends, others showing up with broken tablets or tangled earbuds they hoped he could fix. Elise started joining regularly, not as a guest but as a helper. She'd arrive in worn jeans and a hoodie, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, learning how to solder alongside 10-year-olds. She never acted like she was above the work. In fact, she asked more questions than anyone. One afternoon, while testing a hand-crank charger, she laughed so hard at her own mistake, reversing the wires and causing a tiny spark, that a few kids giggled too. It was the first time Darian saw her truly relaxed, like she'd finally stopped holding her breath. But outside the basement classroom, the air was getting heavier. It started with whispers. A teacher pulled Darian aside after school, asking if he was involved with that Thorne girl. At the grocery store, an older man muttered something about gold diggers as he passed Darian in the cereal aisle. Then came the graffiti. One morning, Darian found his locker spray-painted with 2 words: "Sellout." The school cleaned it fast, but the message stuck in his chest like a splinter. He didn't tell Elise right away. He didn't want her to feel guilty. But she noticed. She always did. "You okay?" she asked one Saturday, watching him fumble with a resistor. He hesitated, then nodded toward the hallway mirror. Someone had taped a printed photo to it, a grainy shot of him and Elise leaving the park taken from a distance. Beneath it, someone had scribbled, "Rich Girl's Pet Project?" Elise's face fell. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," he said quickly. "People see what they want to see, but the truth was it hurt. Not because he cared what strangers thought, but because it felt like his intentions were being twisted, like his kindness was being turned into a transaction. That same week, Mama Lou got a visit from a man in a suit who claimed to be from a Youth Opportunity Foundation. He offered to buy the laundromat building at well above market value and suggested she consider a quieter life down south. Mama Lou, who'd never raised her voice in 30 years, told him to leave and never come back. When she told Darian, her hands were shaking. "They think money can move us like chess pieces," she said, voice tight. "But this place? This community? It's not for sale." Darian hugged her, heart pounding. He'd never felt so small and so determined. Meanwhile, Elise was facing her own storm. Genevieve called a family meeting, what she called a strategy session, at the estate. Darian wasn't invited, but Elise told him about it later, sitting on the curb outside the community center, her knees pulled to her chest. "They said I'm being manipulated," she said, voice low. "One advisor called you a calculated risk, another said I'm romanticizing poverty." She let out a bitter laugh. "Like helping people is some kind of trend I'll get bored of." Darian sat beside her. "You don't have to defend me. I want to," she said fiercely. "Because you're not what they think. You're the most honest person I've ever met." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat with her in the quiet, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. Things came to a head the day the local news ran a short segment. Not a full story, just a 30-second blurb during the evening broadcast. Heiress Elise Thorne has been spotted spending time in East Cleveland with local teen Darian Cross. Sources say the Thorne family is monitoring the situation closely. No context. No quotes from them, just implication. The next morning, Darian's phone blew up. Texts from friends, calls from numbers he didn't recognize. One voicemail was just heavy breathing. Another said, "Stay away from her or you'll regret it." He deleted them all. But that night, walking home from the workshop, he noticed a car slowing down as it passed. He quickened his pace. The car turned the corner and disappeared, but the chill stayed, he told Elise. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm coming to you." "What?" "I'm not waiting for you to come to me anymore," she said. "I'm coming to your world. On your terms." 2 days later, she showed up at the laundromat, not in a car, not with security, but on foot, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the corner shop and a bag of pastries. She wore a plain jacket, no makeup, hair tucked under a beanie. She nodded at Mama Lou, who was folding towels behind the counter. "Hi, Mrs. Cross," Elise said politely. Mama Lou studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Call me Mama Lou, and you must be the girl who's got my grandson working overtime." Elise laughed nervously. "Only if he lets me." Darian came downstairs, surprised. "You walked all the way from the estate?" 30 minutes, she said, handing him a coffee. "Good for the soul." They sat on the steps out front sipping coffee as the neighborhood buzzed around them. Kids on bikes, neighbors chatting over fences, the hum of the dryers inside. For the first time, Elise wasn't an outsider looking in. She was just there, present, real. Later that week, she asked if she could help teach a session, not just assist, but lead a lesson on basic coding using free online tools. Darian agreed, and to everyone's surprise, she was great. Patient, clear, and quick to admit when she didn't know something. One boy, shy and quiet, finally raised his hand and asked a question. Elise knelt beside him, walked him through the code line by line, and when his program ran successfully, she high-fived him like they'd just won a championship. After class, Darian found her wiping down tables. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. "This place, it feels like home." He looked around at the peeling paint, the mismatched chairs, the kids packing up their projects with pride, and realized something. Home wasn't about square footage or marble floors. It was about who showed up, who stayed. But peace never lasts long when 2 worlds collide. A week later, Genevieve called Darian. Her voice was calm but strained. "The board is demanding Elise return to full duties. They're threatening to freeze her trust unless she realigns her priorities." She paused. "They see your friendship as a liability." Darian's stomach dropped. "What does Elise say?" "She says she won't choose," Genevieve replied softly. "And that's the problem." That night, Darian couldn't sleep. He paced his room, mind racing. He cared about Elise deeply, but he couldn't let her lose everything because of him. He thought about walking away, disappearing from her life like he'd never been there. But then he remembered the look on that little boy's face when his code worked. Remembered the girl who'd whispered, "I made this?" Like she couldn't believe her own hands were capable of creation. This wasn't just about them anymore. The next morning, he went to the community center early. He set up a projector, printed new handouts, and wrote a single sentence on the whiteboard. "Your ideas matter." When Elise arrived, he didn't greet her with small talk. He said, "We're not stopping, no matter what they do." She looked at him, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "if they want to make this about us, fine. But we'll keep building, keep teaching, keep showing these kids that they belong in rooms people say they don't." She nodded slowly, then rolled up her sleeves. "Then let's get to work." That day's lesson was on designing apps to solve local problems. One group wanted an app to report broken streetlights. Another wanted to connect neighbors who needed help with groceries. Elise helped them sketch wireframes, test logic, think through real-world use. Darian watched her, really watched her, and saw not an heiress but a young woman who'd found her purpose in the unlikeliest of places. Later, as they cleaned up, she turned to him. "I talked to Aunt Genevieve. I told her I'm taking a gap year. Not to travel. To work here. With you." Darian blinked. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. "This is where I'm needed." He didn't hug her, didn't make a big deal, but he smiled, a real quiet smile, and said, "Then we've got a lot to do." And they did. Because the world might try to pull them apart, but in that basement, surrounded by kids dreaming in circuits and code, they'd already built something stronger than money, stronger than fear. Something that couldn't be erased with a spray can or a boardroom vote. Something real. The gap year announcement hit like a thunderclap. Quiet at first, then echoing through places Darian didn't even know existed. Elise didn't post it on social media. She didn't call a press conference. She simply told her aunt, signed the paperwork for a deferral from her university program, and showed up at the community center the next Monday with a backpack full of notebooks and a thermos of strong black coffee. But news travels fast when money's involved. Within 48 hours, a local business blog ran a short piece. Heiress steps back from elite path to volunteer in Cleveland neighborhood. The tone wasn't hostile yet, but it carried that subtle edge, the kind that makes kindness sound like a phase or a performance. Comments trickled in. "Must be nice to take a year off while the rest of us work 2 jobs. Bet she'll be back in Paris by spring." Darian saw the post. He didn't show it to Elise. He knew she was bracing herself for worse, and worse came. A week later, a glossy lifestyle magazine published a feature titled, "The Reluctant Heiress, Can Elise Thorne Escape Her Legacy?" It included a grainy photo of her and Darian walking out of the laundromat, coffee cups in hand. The caption read, "Spending time with local teen Darian Cross, whose sudden rise coincides with her withdrawal from public life." The word sudden stung, like his life before her didn't exist, like his efforts were invisible until she noticed them. That afternoon, a teacher pulled him aside after class. "You sure you're not in over your head?" she asked, not unkindly. "People are talking." "I know," he said. "But I'm not doing this for them." Still, the weight pressed down. Kids at school started giving him sideways looks. One boy in the hallway muttered, "Must be nice getting paid to hang out with rich girls." Darian let it go. He'd learned long ago that anger only feeds the noise. But then came the brick. It happened on a Tuesday night. Darian was helping Mama Lou close up the laundromat when a loud thud shattered the quiet. Glass rained down from the front window. A red brick lay on the floor, wrapped in a piece of paper. Darian picked it up with shaking hands. Scrawled in marker, "Know your place." Mama Lou didn't cry. She just stood very still, then said, "Call the police." They did. Officers came, took a report, said they'd look into it. But everyone knew. Nothing would come of it. No cameras on that block, no witnesses. Just another act of cowardice in a city used to being ignored. That night, Darian sat on the fire escape, staring at the broken glass glittering under the streetlight. He thought about quitting. Not the program, never that, but stepping back from Elise. Maybe if he disappeared from the picture, the heat would fade. Maybe she could go back to her life without the mess. But then his phone buzzed. It was Elise. Just 2 words. I'm coming. 20 minutes later, she was at the door. Not in a car. Not with security, but on foot. Breath visible in the cold air. Eyes red like she'd been crying. I saw the news, she said, voice raw. I'm so sorry, Darian, he shook his head. It's not your fault. It is, she insisted. Because I'm part of your life now and that makes you a target. And I hate it. He looked at her. Really looked. And saw not the polished heiress from magazine spreads, but a young woman carrying guilt like a second coat. He stepped aside. Come in. They sat in the kitchen, Mama Lou making tea while the 3 of them talked, really talked for the first time. No titles, no pretense. Just 3 people trying to figure out how to protect what mattered. I won't let them scare us off, Elise said firmly. If anything, we double down, Darian sighed. Elise, I don't want your money. I never did. But if we're going to keep this going, it has to be on our terms, yours and mine. Not theirs, she nodded. Then let's make it ours. The next morning, they met with Mr. Delgado and a few trusted parents from the neighborhood. They laid out a plan. The program would become an official nonprofit, community-led, youth-run with a board made up of local teachers, retired engineers, and even a couple of the older students. Elise would fund the startup costs through a private donor account, no Thorn name attached, but after that, the program would sustain itself through small grants, workshops for other schools, and repair services for the community. No press, Darian insisted. No photos, just the work. Everyone agreed, but the world wasn't done watching. A few days later, a tabloid website published a tell-all from an anonymous former Thorn employee, claiming Darian was coaching Elise to rebel and that the whole program was a PR stunt to make the family look charitable. The article was full of half-truths and insinuations, but it spread fast. Screenshots flooded social media. Hate comments poured in, not just at Darian, but at the kids in the program too. One 13-year-old girl, Aaliyah, came to class with tears in her eyes. Someone said, I'm only here because you're using us to get close to her, she whispered. Darian knelt so he was at her eye level. You built that solar charger with your own hands, right? She nodded. Then that's all that matters, he said. What they say? That's noise. What you build, that's real. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Aaliyah's face, about the brick on the floor, about the way Elise looked when she said, I hate that I brought this to your door. He grabbed his phone and recorded a short video, not for fame, not for clout, but for clarity. He sat on the steps of the community center, hoodie up, voice calm. I'm Darian. I live in East Cleveland. I fix bikes, tutor kids, and I'm trying to build something that helps my neighborhood. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't ask for money. I just helped someone one night, and now people think that means I want something. I don't. I just believe kids like me deserve a shot. That's it. He posted it to a local community page. No hashtags, no tags. Just the truth. He didn't expect much. But by morning it had been shared over 1,000 times. Teachers, neighbors, even strangers from other cities left comments. This is what real leadership looks like. My son's in your program. He's never been prouder of himself. Keep going. Elise saw it and texted. That was brave. He replied. Just honest. The video didn't stop the rumors, but it shifted the conversation. Local news reached out, not the gossip blogs, but the actual evening news team. They wanted to do a real story, not about Elise's family, but about the program itself. Darian agreed, but only if the focus stayed on the kids and their projects. The segment aired a week later. It showed Aaliyah demonstrating her water sensor, another boy explaining how he'd fixed his grandma's tablet, Elise helping a group debug a robot car. No mention of wealth, no dramatic music, just ordinary people doing meaningful work. After it aired, donations started coming in, not from corporations, but from regular folks, $20 here, $50 there. A box of used laptops from a school in Akron. The program didn't need much, but the support felt like a lifeline. Then came the real test. Genevieve called Darian one evening. Her voice was tired. The board voted, she said. They're cutting Elise's access to discretionary funds unless she returns to her scheduled path by spring. Darian's chest tightened. What does she say? She says she'd rather walk away from the whole thing than abandon this, Genevieve replied. And I respect that. So I've set up a separate trust, small but enough to keep the lights on for a year. It's in your name, Darian. For the program. No strings. He was silent for a long moment. Thank you, he finally said. But tell her, she doesn't have to choose between her family and us. We'll find another way. She already has, Genevieve said softly. She's staying. The next Saturday, Elise arrived at the center with a stack of grant applications and a determined look. We're applying for every STEM education grant in the state, she said. And I've reached out to professors who might partner with us. We're not waiting for permission to exist, Darian smiled. Then let's get to work. As the weeks passed, something shifted, not just in the program, but in the neighborhood. Parents started stopping by to ask about classes for their younger kids. A local hardware store began donating spare parts. Even the graffiti on Darian's locker was painted over, not by the school, but by a group of students who left a note. We got your back. One evening, as they packed up after a long session, Elise turned to Darian. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night in the rain? He thought about it. Yeah, but I'm glad I did. Me too, she said. Not because of who I am, but because of who we're becoming. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one of the ones Darian had helped fix last summer. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of a community that refused to be broken, they both knew the storm wasn't over. But they weren't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Spring came quietly to East Cleveland, the kind of slow bloom that sneaks up on you. Daffodils pushing through cracked sidewalks, kids trading winter coats for hoodies, the air softening just enough to make you believe in second chances. For Darian and Elise, it wasn't about grand victories or headlines. It was about showing up day after day in a basement that smelled like solder and hope. The program, now officially named Bright Circuit, was humming. They'd secured 2 small grants, partnered with a local tech college for mentorship, and even started a weekend repair clinic where neighbors could bring broken electronics. No one asked about Elise's last name anymore. They just called her Miss Elise or the coding lady, and sometimes when she wasn't looking, kids would leave little thank you notes tucked into her notebook. But peace, Darian had learned, is never permanent. It's something you rebuild every morning. One afternoon, as he was helping a group wire a solar-powered phone charger, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. You think you've won? She'll get bored. They always do. He deleted it without replying. He'd stopped feeding the trolls months ago. What mattered was right here. The girl who just lit up her first LED without help. The boy who finally understood how resistors worked. The way Elise laughed when a robot car spun in circles instead of moving forward. Still, the tension hadn't vanished. The thorn board hadn't backed down. They'd just gone quiet like a storm gathering offshore. Elise's trust fund remained frozen. Her name was no longer mentioned in company press releases, and though Genevieve still sent quiet support, a box of new multimeters, a note saying, "Proud of you," even she seemed stretched thin. Then, in early May, everything changed. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter, hand-delivered to the community center in a crisp white envelope. Inside was an invitation. The Thorn Foundation was hosting its annual Innovation Gala, and Elise was expected to attend. As keynote speaker, Darian read it over her shoulder. You gonna go? She stared at the paper like it might bite her. If I do, they'll use it as proof I'm back in line. If I don't, they'll say I've abandoned my responsibilities. Then go, he said simply. But say what you really think. She looked at him, surprised. You'd be okay with that? I don't care about their gala, he said. But if you've got something true to say it. Just don't let them write your words for you. She thought about it for days. Then she called Genevieve and made a deal. She'd speak. But only if she could talk about Bright Circuit. About the kids, about what real innovation looks like when it's rooted in community, not boardrooms. To everyone's shock, the board agreed. Maybe they thought she'd fall back into place. Maybe they underestimated her. The night of the gala, Darian didn't go. He stayed in the neighborhood, running a late-night session with a group of high schoolers building weather sensors. But Elise texted him a photo before she walked on stage, her in a simple dark dress. No jewels, no flashy designer label, just her, standing backstage, holding a note card with 3 words written in bold, "Build with purpose." Her speech lasted 12 minutes. She didn't mention her parents, Didn't talk about legacy or stock prices. She talked about a boy who fixed his sister's tablet so she could do her homework. About a girl who designed an app to map safe walking routes for seniors. About how real change doesn't start in penthouses. It starts in basements, backyards, and bus stops. I used to think impact meant scale, she said, voice steady. But now I know it means connection. It means showing up for people not because it looks good, but because it's right. The room was silent when she finished. Then slowly Genevieve stood and clapped. Others followed. Not out of obligation, but respect. The next morning, the business papers called it a surprising pivot. But in East Cleveland, no one cared about that. What mattered was that Elise came straight from the gala to the community center, still in her dress shoes, carrying a box of pastries and a printout of a new grant application she'd started on the ride home. I told them if they want me involved, they fund this, she said, tapping the paper. Not charity, partnership. Darian just smiled. Welcome back. But the real turning point came a week later, not from a boardroom, but from a classroom. Aaliyah, the girl who'd once cried over online comments, stood up during a city youth forum and spoke about Bright Circuit. She didn't mention Elise or Darian by name. She just said, "Before this program, I thought tech was for people who looked nothing like me. Now I know it's for anyone who's willing to try." Her words sparked something. A local council member reached out. A nonprofit offered space for a summer camp. Even the school district asked if they could bring Bright Circuit into the curriculum. And through it all, Darian kept his focus on the work. He applied to engineering programs, not the flashy ones, but schools with strong community outreach. Elise applied too, but to a different path. Education policy with a focus on equitable tech access. They weren't trying to escape their worlds. They were building a bridge between them. One evening in late June, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and lavender, Darian and Elise sat on the steps of the laundromat, sharing a bag of groceries they just bought together: milk, eggs, Mama Lou's favorite sweet potatoes, and 2 cans of cheap soda. No black cars idled nearby. No cameras watched from the shadows. Just the sound of kids playing down the block, the hum of dryers inside, and the quiet comfort of 2 people who'd chosen each other, not for what they could gain, but for who they helped each other become. "You ever think about how weird it is?" Elise asked, sipping her soda. "That one rainy night changed everything?" Darian nodded. But it wasn't the rain. It was the choice. "What choice?" "To see each other as people," he said. "Not roles, not labels, just humans trying to do right." She smiled, leaning back on her elbows. "I think that's the rarest thing in the world." "Nah," he said. "It's the simplest. We just forget." Inside, Mama Lou called. "Out, Diao, dinner's ready." The smell of collard greens and cornbread drifted through the screen door. Elise stood brushing dust off her jeans. "You think she'll let me stay for dinner again?" "Only if you promise to help wash dishes," Darian teased. "I'll even dry," she said, grinning. As they walked inside, the screen door creaked shut behind them, a small, ordinary sound. No fanfare, no spotlight, just a shared meal, a warm kitchen, and the quiet understanding that the most powerful stories aren't the ones shouted from rooftops. They're the ones lived in the everyday, in acts of kindness that refuse to be repaid, in friendships that choose integrity over ease, in communities that rise not because they're perfect, but because they care enough to keep going. Months later, when Bright Circuit opened its first standalone space, a small storefront donated by a local business owner, there was no ribbon-cutting ceremony. Just a sign on the door that read, "Open to all. Bring your curiosity." And every Saturday morning you could find Darian and Elise inside, side by side, helping a new group of kids light up their first circuit, debug their first code, or simply believe, really believe, that their hands can build something good. The world kept spinning. The Thorns kept their empire. But in this corner of Cleveland, something quieter and stronger took root. The idea that change doesn't need permission. It just needs people willing to show up, stay humble, and never stop building. And that, more than any fortune or title, was the real inheritance.